welcome back to the How to Podcast series. I have two guys sipping a drink, enjoying a beverage, and joining us on the podcast. If you like to shower after work, you have two people here who would agree with you 100%. That's a good idea. Jason and John are both here from the I Shower After Work podcast. I love the name, by the way. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jason. John, nice to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
I appreciate it. Glad to be here, sir.
All right, so let's start with Jason. Tell me where you are and how you met John. Let's start with that.
Okay, well, originally from Nova Scotia, Canada, I emigrated to the States in 2006. And at that point, I had switched careers. I was in finance and decided to get into the construction field. And while I was going through the apprenticeship school here, John came from another state. And I mean, once we were working in the same school together, we both happened to be cigarette smokers. So we were outside getting to know one another, and the friendship just took off from there. And that's been how many years now? 11 years now that we've known one another. So
wow.
Yeah, just one of those serendipity, happened to be working in the same place at the same time and getting to know one another.
Okay, so John, when did the word podcast come into the conversation for the two of you?
Oh, well over a year ago.
Okay.
Jason and I, we both ride motorcycles. We decided to get away on a long trip, and we were sitting around having a drink after a long day of riding. And Jason, I got this idea. I got this idea for a podcast, and started talking about it. He's like, would you want to do this with me? And I'm like, absolutely. Like, when? Like, let's go. And then it dropped for a year. We didn't even talk about it. And then I, texted him one day and I'm like, hey, do you still want to do this thing? Because if we want to do it, let's do it. And then all the conversations that we started having started happening, and then gear was ordered, and next thing you know, we're launching a podcast.
Yeah, it was all systems go after that text message.
Right.
There you go. Okay, so Jason, then where did this spark come for you to even bring this up about a podcast? How did it happen for you?
Well, I started listening to podcasts very early on, probably 08, 09. I found it was a really great thing to have in your head while you're working or doing things around the house. And when I started thinking about our construction industry, I said there must be some great construction podcasts out there. And the ones that I could find at the time were more serious. They were more focused on the financial aspects and project management and things that are certainly important, but they weren't the day-to-day grind of what John and I and most construction professionals do. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun if we had a construction podcast where we, as you mentioned, we'll have an adult beverage, we'll sit around and we'll talk the way that real construction workers would talk around the break table, around the gang box, the sort of conversations and subjects that we'd get off onto. Many times they would be construction related, but at the same with any work site, sometimes it's just the random conversations you get into about anything. So it gave us some freedom there. And I thought it would be a fun podcast to get started. And when I thought of who I would want to sit back on the other side of the table from and banter, John was the first and only idea that came to mind.
Now, John, when we met, you mentioned you had been listening to my show, which is an honor. I appreciate that. What kind of things were standing out to you when you guys were early days deciding on what the format of your show would be like, learning about podcasting? What kind of things did you find valuable at the beginning in your search to start this all off?
Well, when Jason first brought it up with me on our bike ride, I instantly started digging into it just by myself. And I did a Google search and you came up, and I'm like, all right, well, that's a great place to start. Let's start there.
Okay,
and
good.
The things that I latched onto right away was hearing the other hosts that you had on just saying, you know what, if you're going to do it, do it. Don't worry about it. Just do it. And trying to figure out, who your people are. Who do you want your avatars to be and whatnot. And I just really kind of leaned into, hey, where do we want our podcast to end up on? Well, we wanted to, and we were both on track with, we want to reach the people that are in our shoes, that we're saying the things that we all want to say, but we don't on the job site.
Exactly, man.
And taking the steps and just doing it, just record something. Don't worry about how it sounds. Don't worry about the layout. Don't worry about any of that technical back end stuff. Just record something. And that's kind of just how we did it.
I love it.
Yeah,
and
we jumped in with both feet for sure.
Yeah, and you don't have to be like a professional. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to have, years of experience. You have to go to university for this. You can just grab the mics, grab a conversation, and off you go. And I love that's what you guys do. It's so natural when I listen to your show. I do feel like I'm right there on the site with you guys. And I've mentioned to both of you that my son is in the trade, and I sent it to him as
still
well.
In the trades, right?
Yeah. I sent
Excellent.
it to you guys. I sent your podcast to him, and I'm like, you gotta listen to this, because he's same as what you guys. The origin of why you started it. He's looking for something that he can latch on to as well, and he feels like he knows you guys just through your voice.
Great.
So
that's
this
awesome.
is how it sounds at work. This is the way we talk at work. This is exactly how it feels, and you can't fake that, and that's what I love about your show.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's exciting. Now, okay, how many? 29 episodes, I believe now, Jason?
This week will be 29 coming out this
29
week,
episodes. How are you guys different 29 episodes compared to episode 1?
Yeah. John, what do you say, man?
Please, John.
I got some answers for this.
we have a couple of recordings that I have on my computer that are the older first version ones, and they're painful to listen to now. Our cadence is a lot better. Everything flows a little bit smoother. Decisions that we've made have changed that dynamic, but we're still the same as we were. We haven't changed who we are. It's just gotten easier to talk, because when you first start talking into the mic and recording it, you're stiff. You're not relaxed. You're not. And of course, that's where the adult beverages kick in, and they kind of help us relax a little.
Yeah, if ever we do release the audio from our first couple of recordings, we're actually on my patio outside of my backyard, and they are raw and unorganized. And I talked some wild smack a couple of times, things that we could never really put on the air if we wanted to keep our jobs. Just getting used to the talking on the microphone. Yeah, so that stuff was fun.
It's good. Okay, so the other thing you mentioned is that now you have people in your circle that listen to your show, and you get to cross paths with them. Okay, I've experienced that as well from my podcast. What's it like, though, when somebody listens to your show and gives you feedback? How does that feel? Isn't that great, Jason?
It definitely is. I mean, just this morning, I was just talking to John and his wife. I was at the local city cleanup. I was dropping off my pickup in a trailer full of just junk from the house to get rid of. And when they gave me my bill and said, okay, here's how much it's going to cost, somebody waved the guy down and goes, no, take half off of that. Not $100, that's $50. And he pointed his hard hat. He had one of my stickers. I dropped them off at our local electrical supply house. He had picked one up and put it on his hat and started listening. I'm like, that's amazing. Like, it would put a huge smile on my face this morning. So things like that. Now you get to, John, see people day to day that I don't as often do. What's that like, man?
It's weird. It's really spooky when the weirdest thing I've had happen, honestly, I was on the job site. I heard our podcast playing on somebody's speaker as I walked by. And I looked over at them, and there were a couple of the pipe fitters, which I get along with great. They're good guys. And they looked at me and they're like, you just said this? You called us a baby? And it was so weird to hear it. But then I get the other guys on the other side of that are listening and working right next to me from different trades. And they're like, hey, I really like this. You guys need to lean into this. Like, this would be fun for you to do. And when you get that feedback from people, it's, like I said, really weird and spooky.
Encouraging, though.
But it is super encouraging. Yeah. It's really nice it's like our own little pat on our back, right?
It's amazing. It's amazing because, again, our listeners don't owe us feedback. They've given us their time, and that's how they've paid us. But when they do reach out, that means a lot. And to be rubbing shoulders and elbows with the guys and everyone on the site and knowing, and then again, the stickers. I love the sticker idea. That's a great idea for your that's so good. I love that. It's just to be able to get people's response back. You guys have definitely found your spot. You definitely have found your audience, and you're connecting, and that's all we can ask for, right?
That's all we could hope for, really.
Yeah.
And Dave, I wanted to mention on one of your episodes, Sorry, I can't remember exactly which one because I've listened to so many of them. It was great when you mentioned, you know what, if you're recording and you've got 5 listeners, and I think I really want everybody to understand this. If you've got 5 listeners and those 5 people were sitting in a room that you showed up in, are you going to be the person that turns around and said, no, that's not enough people? Or are you going to sit there and talk with those specific 5 people? And I think that's what we try to do every time is we don't have a huge following, but we want to connect with all of those people that we do have. And I think
that's an excellent point, man, to understand, like, look, we're in the same trenches you are, metaphorically here, you know, we're out there getting after it every day, just like you are. We get it. And I think as our audience grows, fingers crossed, people start to hear that in us, because as John mentioned earlier, we're not trying to pretend to be anything we're not. You mentioned it, and thanks you for that. The mini episode you did on us originally, Dave, that it's a group that is so common through so many countries of construction people who don't have someone out there who this is the voice after the hard hat comes off, after the work boots come off, and that's when the podcast starts. It's nice to know that there's people out there who are enjoying what we're doing, even if it is a small number. That's good enough to keep going. One more listener a week, maybe. Great.
Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't have to grow in leaps and bounds. I think that's probably a fear for a lot of people who are starting out in the podcast world. Oh no, I've been doing this for 10 episodes, 12 episodes, and I've only had, X number of people. That's okay. You had people listening. Yeah. That's all you need. Like, don't be fearful because you're not growing like a celebrity might who gets 50,000 listeners off the bat. We knew that wasn't going to happen with us.
Right.
Yeah, realistic expectations are important in this game, I think.
Yeah, and that you can hear it in your voice when you talk. The podcast always has that welcoming feel, and that's the best part of it. I really love the chemistry that the two of you have together. And again, that going back to what you said earlier, that takes time. When you listen back to episode 1 and your early recordings to 29, you're finding your way. You're learning how each other kind of talks, and you can kind of pick up on each other. You can start to compliment each other, and you're not kind of tripping over each other. It's kind of a dance, kind of, sort of, but you're kind of figuring out each other's steps and how to stay out of the way and give each other room, but also when it's your turn to talk. So, okay, so that's the one thing I would love to chat about a little bit for people who are doing a co-hosted episode like you guys are doing. What are some tricks? What are some things that you guys have put in place so you know when one person's getting ready to finish up their thought and the next person's going to jump in? Do you guys have any kind of cues that you do? I know you do a lot of video as well. How do you know who's leading the conversation next and when one person's done? I think a lot of people find this hard to figure out in the early days, and your suggestions are really going to help.
Go ahead, buddy.
Okay. So the biggest deal that we did, so we have rough outlines that Jason puts together for these episodes.
Okay.
And we keep them on a drive so each one of us can see them, while we're at our houses. And it live updates as we're typing in them. It's a great way to just share the ideas and get prepared. But then Jason will have what he wants to say in the regular coloring. If I'm adding something to it, I'll put it in like blue or red, and we can kind of follow down that line, and then we can each hit on those points. There is a little bit of over talking in our episodes because we're having this great conversation and we get excited. But we'd also try to point it out, and you'll hear us be like, "Oh, well, don't mean to step on you. Sorry." But we do get this kind of excited banter that we tend to lean into a little bit, which makes it a little fun.
And again, to be on brand, that happens on construction sites
all the time.
Whether it's just a conversation you're having with somebody or your actual work talk, trying to figure out a problem or get something started. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. It's on brand is basically what it comes down to, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And hand signals. So since we don't actually have video, I mean, we certainly use some of the video that we take for social media and things like that, which we don't do a ton of. I should be better at that. But yeah, even just the hand signal of if I'm trying to look up something on the internet as we go, or I'm adding in a note that John can see on that drive in a live update to ask a guest a question, or, hey, I'm looking this up. I can just give him the, hey, keep on talking symbol.
Yep.
You're right. Exactly.
You're spinning your hands around.
Yeah. Keep going from it. I got to do something here. Those little things just non-verbally kind of work themselves out over time.
Yep.
So
it's good.
It's when we started to have the occasional guest, I think we've had 3 guests now. That was a big change for us and not tripping over each other.
Right.
We were lucky that our first guest, and if you ever hear this, shout out to Doug. He was an excellent interview, well-spoken, and he was able to keep himself on track, which helped us to stay on track.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been for the fact that he was so well-organized, it would have been worse than it was. So.
It would have been a little bit of a train wreck.
Yeah. But yeah, anybody who's getting started with this, if you do have a dual host or multiple host even, that drive that we use, just Google Drive or any kind of thing like that, where you can both be on the same thing on your own laptop, on your own side of the table, and live update, to even put in a note to say, hey, ask your guest this, or bring up this point so I have a fun reaction to it. It seems organic in the moment, but you can plan those things. And I mean, it's an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Now I say easy, but John is our technology guru. I wouldn't be half as good at this stuff if it were not for the fact that he was very familiar with it when we got started. He really helped us out a lot with this part of it. So
I like it. And while you guys are talking, you're on my screen. I can see hand signals happening. I can see little, hey, and I can see you guys are doing it right now as we're doing this. I love it. Okay, so John, talk about how you split up the roles so that one person's doing everything and the other person just shows up, pours a drink, and sits down. You guys have split this up, so you kind of divided your tasks, your duties, and all the things about the podcast. How did you guys decide on who does what in the show?
We started having a lot of those tough conversations right from the get-go before we even recorded anything. I've always been more kind of tech head, so the back end stuff I leaned into. Jason was really into the more social platforms and whatnot. So that was actually a really easy split to make. And it was almost, I was just saying, hey, I'll take care of this. I'll take this on. And Jason's like, well, I'll take on building the outlines, coming up with, he's the creative head, right? So he comes up with most of the episode ideas that we have. I'll throw one in there randomly just to kind of catch him off guard.
You have your moments, buddy, for sure. Yeah.
But bless my wife, she's a social media guru, so she helped out a lot with that back end stuff.
Yeah, shout out to Ashley. She really did help us a lot with this. Yeah,
right.
Even our original logo that we used just when we first got going, what she called this week a placeholder for because recently John has worked and developed us a new logo that's a little more fitting to our brand that we're going to roll out here probably in the next couple of weeks. Good. But even some things like that she helped us out with. God love her for that, because it really made things easy for us when we were getting going. She took care of a couple of items that kept being on the list of things we meant to take care of.
Yep.
To have a support team to help us out with that was a big benefit. And for people who are starting their own podcast, don't be scared to ask your friends and family and stuff for help. Yeah. My brother-in-law, Sean Foster, shout out to him. He was the one who wrote us and played the music for our intro and outro.
Nice.
Just out of the kindness of his heart. He's a fantastic musician. Don't be scared to reach out to the people who might be able to help you out. The people are usually willing to give you a bit of their time to help you succeed in a project you're trying. And I think some people try to take everything on their own. And you can't always do that if you want to be successful. So
it's good. When you guys look at your stats and everything, are you seeing listens in countries and places you didn't anticipate?
We did once. Jason brought up a very good point that there's a good chance that it was a VPN.
Yeah.
But really, it's really dialed into the US, Canada.
Good.
That's kind of where it's stuck at right now.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll grow. Hopefully it'll get over into other countries and stuff like that.
Yeah. Anybody listening in any other country other than Canada and the United States, reach out. We do want to know if it's growing beyond that. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, the one thing I know you guys did, as well is you went with Buy Me a Coffee, but you rebranded it. Jason, tell me what you did to Buy Me a Coffee. I love what you did.
Well, they have the option on there, and we did get that from you. And thanks again, Dave, because we got some success from that widget on our website right away. the Buy Me a Coffee app that we rebranded to Buy Me a Beer because it seemed a little more on brand for us. If it could have been Buy Me a Whiskey, that would have been perfect. But Buy Me a Beer is close enough. Yeah, well, once we heard that from you, I mean, what a great idea to just give the listeners a chance to give back a little bit. And we were surprised about the feedback right away. Like people were great about it. And we got into this saying, okay, don't worry about ads. Don't worry about sponsorships. We'll put a product out. We'll get a library of listenership. And then that might organically come about later. But I mean, something so simple as this app that you mentioned has been a way for us not only to see some direct financial feedback from our people, but John and I had the idea after we got it set up that we now pre-record just a little snippet that we can put in the middle of our episodes that we call coffee breaks, because that happens on construction sites. And we thank a recent contributor as the sponsor of the show that week. And things that we got from you by learning from the How to Podcast series. I mean, for anybody listening, this is a resource. Go back and listen to old episodes. Like John and I have really leaned on your podcast and the information we got since we've been going along. And yeah, the Buy Me a Beer thing is great. And I'm happy we could go to the beer thing because, again, it is a little more on brand for us.
Yeah. I've seen some of the donations. It shows when you go to your Buy Me a Coffee website, when you go to donate, it actually shows up past donations. It's great to see people responding. What does it mean to you, John, to know that someone's out there, and even if it's just like $5, what does that mean to you to see that come through?
That's huge.
Right.
Because that means not only are they giving their time to listen to us,
right,
they're enjoying it, and then they're willing to give a little bit of the money that they work so hard for. It's huge. It's unfathomable I can't even describe how it feels.
Blown away. That's what I always think. I'm just blown away that people are willing to do that.
Yeah. And it's not something that we expect. It's not something that we plan for. It's just, we see it come in, and I'm texting Jason like, hey, did you just see this?
Right.
This is crazy.
It's wild.
You know?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are going to have those wild moments that do start podcasts, whether it's, oh, wow, like people are listening. Oh, wow, someone donated. Oh, I got feedback. Like those little wow moments are what really keep me excited and going. And
it really spurs the drive. It spurs the want to keep going. And
yeah. And even something small, so $5, one text message, an email, someone giving you something, take those little wins and just run with those, because in the beginning, when you're growing, those are the little wins. Right. Appreciate the little wins is what I'd say to anybody who's considering or is new to podcasting.
Right.
That's good. I was working with a podcaster this week, and the topic of Buy Me a Coffee came up, and they said, I don't need, like I'm self-funded. I don't need any income from my podcast. I'm just doing this for a hobby or for fun or whatever. I don't even need it. So why would I do that? And my comment back to them was, okay, well, you might not need it, but your audience might need to do this for you. There's when you guys show up with 29 episodes, giving great value, just putting your time and effort into this, whether or not you need the $5 is kind of irrelevant, in the sense that as a listener, I see so much value in what the two of you are doing that I want to, it's in our human nature, I want to do something back. And even if it's only $5. So I said to this one podcaster, if you don't need the money, then instead collect the money and donate it to a local charity at the end of the year, and then come back to your audience and say, because of you guys, a family is going to have Thanksgiving dinner this year. We were able to buy all this food thanks to you and donate it to this family. So thank you.
That's
you
crazy.
You guys were the ones that supported the family through the show. Like, that is amazing. And then as a listener, to hear that I helped contribute to a family through you guys, for example, is like, that's the best feeling ever. I'm going to keep donating because I want to see what you do with my money next. Right.
Even your pay it forward idea, where you were our first buy us a beer, right? Paying it forward to another podcast that one of us listens to, or we both listen to, even something like that, to just show like, yeah, we don't need that to keep this going. We're not trying to make money at it yet. We're just hoping to be successful. But even pushing that along to another group, another podcast that's trying to get off the bat, to encourage them the same way people have done with us is kind of my mindset on the whole thing as well. Like,
and I don't think people understand you're actually building a community. It's weird to think of it that way, but you are gathering people together that are listening to you, and you're creating this community. And when everybody can get on the same page or do something as a body of people, it makes a huge difference, no matter what it is, really.
Sure.
Okay, so Jason, there's someone listening to this right now. They have had this gnawing idea of doing a podcast, and they're like, I don't know if I can do this. These guys sound so great. You know, it sounds like you've been doing this for years. You guys just have it. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I can do this. Having you guys come on, I want to encourage that person that, yes, you can do this. So from your point of view, your expertise, you're 29 episodes in, you've done it. It's not bragging if you've done it. So what would you say to that person that's really kind of struggling with the overwhelm of starting a show? What would you say?
Start recording. As John mentioned earlier, get some simple equipment. And I know it's you've mentioned it many times in your podcast, Dave. Don't get caught in the weeds of what kind of equipment you need. Don't let all the people tell you what to do. Don't jump in and find out that you thought you got the wrong mic or things like. No, get some simple equipment, get started, and you'll know almost immediately, I think, if it's something that's going to be fun for you, if you feel like you've got some value to get out there. And it takes a little bit of time to develop your own voice as these things go. And I mean, if I may, something that was kind of interesting for us when we first got going, for everybody out there who is thinking about starting a podcast, just so you know, your voice sounds different in your head than it does on recordings. You're going to listen to it the same way we used to have old school answering machines. You're like, that's what I sound like? Don't let that stress you out. It threw us off a little bit at the start. Like, my voice sounds funny in these headphones. And everybody was like, no, that's exactly what you sound like. So, but to your point, yeah, just try, get going, get started. It's the same as anything else. You will either learn that it's fun and it's worth investing your time to learn the technical aspects in the back end and how you want to organize your episodes, the things you want to talk about. And I mean, with John and I, we sort of morphed a little over the time of doing the podcast. Originally, it was talking about construction things, but a lot of the time now we're also encouraging people to talk to their kids and nieces and nephews and friends and kids in the community. A big part of it is getting people into the trades now. When we first started, that wasn't part of our show, but we realized that it was such an important thing for us that we include it fairly often. So not only get started with your podcast, but also be willing to let it change and adjust as it goes. Your idea and your original thought might not be what it turns out to be. That doesn't mean it doesn't have value. So get after it.
I like it. John, anything to add to that?
Jason summed it up really well.
Yeah.
The only thing that I can even think about is don't get hung up on trying to perform. Like, you don't need to, because you have a voice, you have a story of your own, you have valuable information. It might take a little while for your information to hit the right person or for that right person to find you, but it will. As soon as you put something out there, it's out there for everybody in the ether to get a hold of. And you just can't worry about, I'm not finding the right person, or I don't have the growth that I want. And it will drag you down really fast if you let it. And if you love the process and that back end process of it, that makes a huge difference. It makes it really easy to just keep going.
Right. And I just thought about something, if you don't mind me adding one more thing. We sort of were winging it for the first 5 or 6 episodes. Once we started just having an outline, not a script, not all the words you're going to say, but just an outline we could follow basically point by point to sort of keep us on track. Some sort of reasonable to basic outline of what you want this particular episode to entail. And then you can spin off on tangents and things like that all the time. But at least have enough organization, a little bit of outline of what you plan to get at, the points you want to hit today, just to keep you organized. Because if not, it was real easy for us to get in the weeds and all of a sudden we were completely off topic and trying to find our way back and forgetting where you were. So some sort of just basic outline is really important.
John, you mentioned something before we hit record about the sense that your podcast will never get in the way of your friendship. Tell us
Absolutely not.
what is your escape route if the podcast gets in the way between the two of you? What did you guys decide right up front?
You won't have any more episodes out.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. The episodes will just stop. We value our friendship more than we do the podcast. And that was a hard conversation for us to have. It's like, hey, what if this thing's really taken off? What if it's doing this? And then all of a sudden it starts eating at our friendship. And because we do spend time outside of the podcast, we're riding motorcycles, we're hanging out, we're doing things. If it gets in the way of that, we're done. I will drop it so fast.
But it's actually gone the other way. John and I live about an hour apart. So when we have to go between one site and the other to record, we both have a studio in each of our homes. I actually think it's had the opposite effect, though, buddy. I think we've been able to grow our friendship a little bit because we spend a lot more time together now and talking 100%. About it, texting, emailing, phone calls. Yeah, it was a concern at the beginning. And like you say, we had some hard conversations, but I'm happy to say I think it went the opposite direction.
Yep. And we had to have those hard conversations because it's such a baseline for what you're doing, especially as two friends. When you have a good buddy that you want to do a podcast with, you have to decide and be very, very honest and very, very blunt of how things are going to work. How are the financial aspects of this going to work? What does that look like?
Workload share. We have a lot of conversations of, hey, we're buying new stickers, we're buying new equipment, we're doing this, and we're both investing in this. And a lot of it is, hey, I'm buying stickers. Cool. I've got the recording equipment, the new stuff that we're going to buy. And we're constantly talking. It's at least a conversation every month. Hey, are you still enjoying this? Hey, do you feel that it's balanced? Do you feel like we're off kilter a little bit? Do I need to give you, some money for this? And usually every time we're like, yeah, no, we're good. Don't give me any money. I've got this because this is going to come up down the road. Don't worry about it. Yeah. If it's a multi-host experience, if it's someone that you're friends with, which most podcasts I would think that have multiple hosts or at least friends or good acquaintances before that, you can have those conversations pretty easily with a friend.
Yep.
There's no reason that you can't just sit down and go, okay, let's be adults for a second. Let's figure this out.
Yep.
Workload, things like that. A prime example is, and it wasn't a bad thing at all, when we had our pre-interview with you, Dave, when we got done, John was like, wow, you were talking way more than me. You can have those conversations and you can't be offended about it. It's whether you're making money or not, you're starting basically a business of some kind.
Yes,
that absolutely. May or may not be successful. That's the same as any business. And you can have some frank conversations with your co-hosts and partners to say, okay, this happened. You can't be all hung up on, be offended because I talk too much or you talk too little or we got on stepping on each other. And no, you work forward.
Right.
Yeah. Be adults about it when you're doing your podcast stuff, doing anything, because it's too easy to take something personal when it was for the growth of the podcast. And it's simple, again, simple adult conversations. So
yep.
It's good. John, what do you guys have planned for? Do you have like success kind of thing? Like, if we get to this certain spot, that's kind of where we're going to sit and talk again about the next thing. Do you have like milestones set up for the podcast at all? Any plans?
We really don't.
No.
We have the, hey, you know what? After we decided that we were going to commit a year, 52 episodes.
Good.
That was a guaranteed. We're going to do it for a year, and then we're going to reevaluate.
Good.
And that's just a timeline thing. And we've had a couple of conversations of, okay, so what does our listener base look like at that year in order to make it worth it to keep going? And that number, as we've talked throughout this 29 episodes coming up, that number has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And we realized that it's more important for us to keep going because we are still enjoying it so much. At this point, the listener base doesn't even matter. We don't care how many listens we get. We love everybody showing up. We love everybody that's, supporting us and letting us keep doing this. But it really is just hey, you know what? Now at this point, 52 episodes, let's talk if we're going to keep going. And we pretty much already decided that we're just going to keep going.
For sure.
So
I like it. And that was one thing back in the early days of the podcast, I was trying to encourage podcasters just to celebrate the small. Like, don't look at us defeated, again, back to your point about the 5 people in the room, don't let that be a sign of defeat. That's a sign of those are 5 people who could have picked anything else in the world to do, but they listen to your show. And the one thing I challenge people who are in the big Facebook groups spouting off their 100,000 just downloads in 5 seconds and all that. I'm like, would you podcast for one person? And you get this weird look on their face like, no, that's not worth my time. And I'm like, well, really? Like, what is your number? Like, what's your minimum number that you'll show up and do this for? And I love the idea of a small podcast. You can do more with a small audience, engage better with them, get to know them by name over a period of time. Like the sticker on your hat, like everything, right? That's something you can't replicate when you have a huge audience of a bunch of people you've never met, you may never meet. I love the fact that you guys have that real organic feel to your show. That's spectacular.
It came up in one of your recent episodes, pardon me, that I was listening to of hearing my own voice on a podcast. There was a couple podcasts I listened to that I was like, I'm going to call and leave a voicemail. And when I heard my voice from the voicemail on that podcast, I was like, oh my God, they use my name. You'd mentioned just the other day, and the same thing now when we shout somebody out or they're the sponsor of the show through the Buy Me a Beer app. I realized those things were big engagements, and I hope more people take advantage of us with that.
Yep.
I like it. Who do you got lined up in the future for future guests? Any ideas?
Well, I'm traveling home to see some family here in the next couple weeks. A couple of our original listeners, one of whom happens to be my brother, they run a small business where they turn Connex boxes into tiny homes. I'm taking my equipment with me. I'm going to do a job on the spot. I'm going to interview those guys. But we're always trying to get somebody. We're letting everybody know, like, if you think you'd be a good guest, reach out. Like, let us know. There's a couple people we've got in the wind who are trying to get set up. Interviews have been really fun so far.
Yeah.
And we'd like to do a lot more of those, especially across different trades, because the people we've had on so far, 2 of them have been electricians because that's who we know. But we want to branch out and get some more people in there, especially within the construction trades, because we all fall into our own tribe. And we all give the other construction groups grief, like electricians especially. They give us grief about never cleaning up, they tell us, and things like that. We would love to have the banter of some different trades. So we're always on the lookout. But at the moment, nothing really scheduled right now.
No.
Okay.
But we
got a lot of episodes that are just us. And
right. Yeah. But we would love it to be similar to you, where we can set up a calendar and start getting people to reach out to be on with us, because I think there's a lot of value in hearing the other perspectives. So,
and if
it's fun,
I just kind of want to bust their chops a little bit.
Well, and take the same thing in reverse.
Exactly.
Again, it's right on brand for us. The construction trades of us giving each other grief on the job site. That's what we want in the podcast as well. So
yeah, for sure.
I like it. John, before we close off, give me a little update. How you feeling in the trades? Are we seeing more kids kind of heading that way out of school? What's your big wish for the trades? What are you seeing?
Man, we've got a huge problem. We've got a lot of guys retiring. I think the ratio right now is for every 7 guys that we got retiring, got 1 coming in.
Wow.
And that's been a downward spiral for several decades now. And we went through this period where parents were telling their kids, no, go to college. You need to have a college degree to get a good job. And that's frankly just not true. Not anymore. I've heard reports that a lot of the younger generation coming up are seeing the effects of what the student loan debt in the country has done to their folks and their family members and stuff. So they're straying away from that. They're finding other means. I would hope that we're going to get a younger set of people coming in, people that are looking at the trades going, you know what, these are skills and things that I'm going to carry for a lifetime, which is so true. And it affects everything in your life. But I want the construction trades to actually come up and see more people diving into these, frankly, just awesome jobs. And they're not easy jobs. Let's not sugarcoat it. we work ourselves very hard. We strain our bodies. I'm dealing with effects of the job. Jason's dealing with effects of the job. I've got neck and shoulder problems. He's got knee problems just from beating ourselves up. But if I were to say, is it worth it? 1,000%. There is no doubt in my mind. And hopefully in the next couple of generations coming up, we'll actually get those numbers back up to where they need to be. I think the last time I heard, we were running a shortage of empty open construction jobs in just the US was 375,000 jobs that were short.
When people say they can't find work.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
And our motto that we use for the podcast, it just sort of came up organically, is your work keeps the world working. We say it at the end of every episode. If people listen to nothing else on our podcast, play that for your kids and your nieces and nephews. That's what we want. Nothing keeps going without us. Everything breaks down in a month.
Yep, exactly. Everything, construction affects everything in your life. You go to the grocery store, you go to an office job, you drive your car, you do anything. None of that would happen without construction workers. And doesn't matter what part of the world you live in. And I think that's what thing people have kind of lost sight of, is they look at and see all the dirty, noisy construction workers and hear the banter and the language and stuff like that we have, and they don't like it. And it's just, you know what, if you're enjoying your 72-degree office space, think a construction worker.
Yeah. I like that. Jason, before we go, to date, what's the proudest moment in the podcast for the two of you? What, from your perspective, what makes you proud when you think about the show?
Wow, that's a great question. For me, it was the first time a random old friend that I hadn't talked to in years. It must have been 15 years since I spoke to this person, friends from youth, who randomly reached out on social media and went, wow, the podcast is great. It's so strange to hear your voice after all these years. How you doing? And we reconnected. And I had that with an old friend and then an old coworker who we're hoping to have on as a guest here shortly, who was a mentor to me during my apprenticeship, who it was basically the same conversation, like, wow, I hadn't thought about you in years, and now here's your voice in my head. Those moments were really, really something for me. So, and getting back to originally, the fact that I already mentioned it really strengthened John and I's friendship over the last year that we've been working this. In the last 6 months, we've really putting episodes out. Those are the two things I'd say that have been the biggest.
It's good. John, you got to have a chance too. Come on.
The proudest moment.
Yeah.
Really, it's just being able to spend more time with Jason, and just, I don't know, like, everything is so surreal at this point, because we are growing and we're doing things, we're changing things. And I can't pin it down to one thing. I really, really do enjoy talking to people that are listening. It is so much fun to just sit there and go, thank you. And in person, look at these people and go, thank you for taking the time to have us in your ear. Like, that means more to me than anything else.
Yeah.
And if I may, real quick.
Yeah.
The moment that I came home from work one day, unloading the dishwasher, and had the epiphany of, hey, Alexa, play the I Shower After Work podcast. It didn't even dawn on me before that. And one day I was sitting there and all of a sudden there's John and I's voice in my kitchen. I'm like, oh my God, anybody can do that. That was a really eye-opening moment. Like, wow, this is really out there in the world for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
That was something too.
I was editing the podcast. I was editing an episode and I get this text message. I just found out I can do this, dude. This is weird.
Yeah, that was something for sure.
That's good. Okay, the website, guys, where are we going? How do we find everything? And as far as connecting with you guys, buying you guys a bevy, where do we go?
You can go to the ISAWpodcast.com. That'll come right up. The widget pops right up on the website.
Yep.
Email of ISAW Podcast at gmail.com. Actually, that changed. Oh my God. So it's hosts at ISAWpodcast.com.
Yeah.
And you can reach Jason and I directly by Jason at ISAW Podcast, John at ISAWpodcast.com. But then you can actually, I like the phone. We have a phone number set up for the podcast. It's 507-607 ISAW. It's 507-607 4729.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we'd love any feedback that one of us said. And if you have ideas for episodes, let us know. Even if it's not construction related, like we say, we talk about stuff that you just might BS around the break table about. We will banter about anything. Just let us know. Yeah. We're here for all the guests. So we're here for all the listeners, I should say. So,
So any plans of a calendar for the podcast for the two of you?
That's coming.
What?
That's coming.
It's in the works right now.
No way. All right. There you go. I need one of those.
It seems to be the only way that we can keep scheduled and start thinking ahead, especially for guests and things. We've mentioned it before. We've learned so much from you, Dave. So we appreciate everything you're doing for everybody out there.
All right, everyone. Thank you, guys, for being here. Guys, everyone listening, head over to the podcast. You know somebody who is in the trades or should be. They should be listening to this podcast. So, guys, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. Thank you for listening to the show. Anything I can do in the future, please let me know. I'd love to support you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. We really appreciate you, buddy.
Thanks for having us on, bud.
Hey, thanks for being here on the How to Podcast series. Glad to have you on the show with us, listening in. And hope they're finding value in the podcast. I hope you're finding something that helps you with your show, helps you with the tools and the information from these amazing guest co-hosts through our daily Daves and these solo episodes. The variety of what we're doing here on the podcast is all designed for you so that you can get the tools you need to create your podcast and keep going with your show. That's why we're here. That's why I'm doing this. And I'm glad you're here finding value in this. If you would like to do a little bit more than just be a listener, if you want to do community with podcasters, we have a thing called our Meetup on meetup.com. You can come find us, and there'll be a link on our website at howtopodcast.ca, and you can come and join in on our meetup. Instead of just being a listener, you could actually participate and come in and join other podcasters, just like you, at your stage, at your level, where you're at right now. And then other podcasters who are maybe a little further down the road, who can learn from you and you can learn from them. And we host these meetups on a regular basis. Again, go to howtopodcast.ca and you'll find all the information there. We'd love for you to come join us at our next meetup. The only thing we need at our next meetup is you. You're the only thing missing from all of this. So consider joining our meetups. Again, they're totally free on a regular basis, all through howtopodcast.ca. And I'd love to hear more from you about your podcast as well. There's a SpeakPipe link on howtopodcast.ca. Leave a message. I'd love to hear about you and your show and how we can work together to get your message into the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing the show with another podcaster that you're like, hey, I think you'd really like this episode. Go ahead, share the episode, and let's get more podcasters on the mic. Thanks for listening.